Hey my good friend, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. Today we're test driving the 2017 GMC Acadia. It's all new for this year, completely redesigned from the ground up. So there's a lot to talk about. Now before we get out driving, I want to talk about what's going on here. For 2017, the Acadia got a lot smaller and a lot lighter, almost 700 pounds lighter, and in some cases more than 700 pounds lighter. And they've done this by a lot of new tricks with the body construction, but it's also 6 inches shorter, wheelbase as well as length. Now before you go saying, oh, GMC messed up, they made it smaller, the reality is the old Acadia, as well as the Chevrolet Traverse and the Buick Enclave, of which it shared its architecture, those were the largest crossover SUVs in the market, quite a bit bigger than any of their competitors. Now, this is literally right in line with most of its main competitors, and I'm talking about Ford Explorer, I'm talking about Toyota Highlander, Honda Pilot, and the many others out there that are right in that same size range. The Pathfinder, I will point out, just a couple inches longer, but now it's right sized to be right in the sweet spot, literally, with its competitors. So what we've got here is a vehicle that looks a little bit more svelte, because it is. This is an all-terrain model based on the SLT1 trim grade, and basically what that gives us is a lot of off-road goods in hardware, but visuals as well. Black trim here around the grille, and this is a diamond black, sort of metallic black finish that's really handsome with this, I think. Satin chromes here, down here on the lower fascia, as well as the grille. These headlights, not the most feature-packed out there in terms of competition with LED and all the gizmetry out there, but they're very handsome looking, and I like the way they wrap around here with this hood line. I think they've done a nice job with the styling elements there. Now, wheels on this one, all-terrain. They upgrade to 20-inch wheels with this all-terrain package. It's a little bit of a curiosity because typically when you get into an off-road package, it's better, you know, as far as handling and driving, you keep those wheels down, but they've actually gone up, and we'll see how that affects the driving here in a little bit. As we come down the side here, there are a couple styling elements that I really think need to be pointed out. The first is we've got generous black plastic cladding down here along the bottom that really ties in nicely with some of the contours they've got going down there at the rocker, and it's a pretty nice, well integrated look. Here you've got this kick up here in the rear window, which is very similar to what we first saw in the Envoy 2 generations ago for their midsize SUV, and it's just sort of become a GMC thing. Now because we're on the all-terrain up here, you've got this roof rack that's actually blacked out. So they've really sort of given this a cohesive look that not only ties in with styling of the previous generation, but brings a little something new. Out here at the back of the Acadia, I think it's pretty handsome. We've got LED elements in the taillights there, more of the satin chrome trim with a little bit of a dark look to it. I like that. GMC, very big right here on the back. Integrated spoiler up there with a third row brake light. Down here in the lower fascia, I like the fact that we've got big dual exhaust pipes, and those are real exhaust pipes, not some fake trim piece. If you touch those when this thing's hot, you're gonna burn yourself. The other thing, of course, we have power opening lift gate. Everything really has to have this now. That's just a rite of passage for a crossover SUV. Now, button will open it, button will close it. You can do that with the key fob. There's also a button inside, but it does not have the motion activation that a lot of vehicles are starting to offer now. The interior of this vehicle is actually very pleasing to look at from the standpoint of, in the all-terrain here, we've got a lot of nice color combinations. I've got this nice saddle brown leather with black insets, a lot of stitching that really gives you a nice luxurious look in here. I always like black and tans together. Now the rest of the interior here, we've got sort of a soft touch dash with some stitching on it. But as I look around the interior, there's a lot of differential in material quality. I've got cheap plastics here, cheap plastics there. I've got nice soft touch materials here, and there doesn't seem to be any cohesiveness to it all the way around. For instance, the door panel and the dash, when you look at them, the color and the sheen, they just don't match up. It's quite visible. And as you look around some of the rest of the interior, you've got standard GM parts here and there, and other parts that look like they were designed specifically for this vehicle. Now, I know in mass production that's just the way it is today, but it's something I do like to point out because there are a lot of vehicles in this class where you can tell they've really gone the extra mile to make that interior special. And here I'm just seeing a lot of this and that from other vehicles that I've driven from GM. Now, a lot of vehicles in this class have power opening shades for their sunroof, or a really easily slide open one. This one has sort of a snap open one here. One of the curiosities though in the way it works is the fact that if you go to open the sunroof without opening the shade first, you get an abrupt little surprise. Now these seats are very comfortable. They're fully power operated and they have nice side supports with the bolstering. They are heated but not ventilated like some in class. And the other thing missing here is memory. Again, we're close to $50,000 and that's typically something that we see when we're in this price strata. Now the seating position here, definitely more car-like than most SUVs. I'm sitting down in this vehicle and very little of the hood visible, and the dash is quite long out in front of me, so you definitely feel like you're more in a sedan or a car than you are sitting up on an SUV. The instrument cluster here is 2-dial with a big center screen that has a lot of customizable displays in it. The steering wheel behind it, a lot of controls here, no paddle shifters, but you do have controls on the back of the steering wheel here for the radio and some of your other infotainment needs. The center stack, very simple. One thing I do like about what they've done here is there's a big huge bin down here for your phone. In there, 2 USB ports, an auxiliary port, and a 12-volt outlet, so you've got all the outlets that you need in there. And I just like the fact that it's really easy to throw that phone in there and really easy to get to. The back seat of the Acadia, even though this thing actually got 6 inches smaller both in wheelbase and in overall length, actually has an inch of extra legroom back here in the second row. And it actually has a lot of adjustments too. You've got a slide down here, and you can actually adjust the seat back rake as well. It's not very easy to do while I'm sitting here, so I'm not going to demonstrate it, but you can adjust the recline. Now, the seat height, as you can see, is actually pretty good. I was impressed with the overall comfort back here, and there's a lot of amenities too. I've got vents back here. There's an AC power port as well as 2 USB ports. Now the headroom back here, as you can see, very good, even with the sunroof here, which typically takes a little bit of headroom out of there. And legroom, as I said, very good. And these seats are about halfway forward, halfway back, as they always are when I test these vehicles. The Acadia does offer a 3rd row seat option. This one doesn't have it because we are in the All Terrain, which is more off-road oriented, which means they've taken that 3rd row out so that it's better for weight distribution and things like that. There is a nice big deck back there as a result, as you can see, and these seats here do fold down in a 60-40 split. If you had the 3rd row, you could also fold it down in a way to get that flat load deck. Now, underneath this deck, because the 3rd row isn't there, a lot of storage. There's 2 big storage areas, both at the very rear as well as in the middle where that 3rd row seat would be. And underneath that, thank goodness, there is a spare tire. Now, it takes a little bit of getting to, but it's there because we are in an SUV. And as I always say, if you have an SUV and you cut a tire open on a rock, a can of Fix-A-Flat and an inflator just isn't going to help you. Another feature this has, and I really cringe when I think about it, is the rear seat reminder. GMC's made a lot of hay about it, and basically what it does, when you turn off the vehicle, a light comes on the dash with a chime that says, "Oh, look in your back seat, don't forget your child, stupid." Or just, it really says something that we have to have something like that in society today. And while that's pretty neat, I think parents, if they're going to forget their kid in the back seat, they're going to learn to ignore that. What the system really ought to do is send them a text message, because they're going to forget their kid back here. Chances are that's where they're at. When it comes to scoring this interior, as I said, it's very pleasing to look at. The materials in here, there is a little bit of mismatch here and there, and I do think there's a lot of little features missing for this price tag, but overall, it gets 4 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is the latest generation GMC IntelliLink. Now, it is virtually identical to what you're going to find in a Chevrolet, a Buick, and some Cadillac models. They just brand it different for all their different brands. But what we've got here is a lot of functionality, very nice looking graphics, easy to read, easy to see while you're on the go. It has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay functionality, not something that everyone has. Now here we've also got Bose audio, sounds very good. For the most part, I'm very pleased with it. When you dig into the menus and start using some of the other functions, it does get a little bit more confusing and there's a bit of a learning curve, but I'm pretty pleased here overall. The infotainment system gets 5 out of 5 stars. What's under the hood here is the 3.6-liter VVT V6 that's been very popular with General Motors vehicles, but this is the latest generation of it, which means it now has direct fuel injection and it has cylinder deactivation technology. It can run on 4 cylinders to save fuel when you don't need the power. And power? 310 horsepower and 271 pound-feet of torque, here with a 6-speed automatic transmission. So how does it go? Woo! It's got some smoky burnout potential. Woo! Now, okay, so it's pretty quick. It's got lots of power, 310 horsepower on tap, as we talked about, but this has got something that very few, if any, other front-wheel drive crossover all-wheel drive vehicles have. This has a drive mode selector down here that lets you lock it in 2-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, which is why we got some nice scratch back there. Now, why is that an important thing to offer? Well, here's the thing. Most of these vehicles now, they default to front-wheel drive most of the time, but when you really put your foot in it and you need traction, it automatically hooks you up with all-wheel drive, period. This lets you lock it there, and that does a couple of things for you. Obviously, it lets you do burnouts if you choose, but the other thing it really does is gives you fuel economy potential, because this is rated exactly the same with all-wheel drive as the front-wheel drive model. 19 mpg city, 25 mpg highway, and 20 mpg combined. Good. And so that gives you the opportunity to have the all-wheel drive without the mileage deficiency if you set it there. And actually, I've been driving it that way most of the week. Now, this does have several different drive modes. It has all-wheel drive, it has sport, which includes all-wheel drive. It also has an off-road mode, which we'll get to pretty soon. But at the end of the day, it's just nice to have those choices. It's just a very rare commodity here in this world. Now, fuel economy, even with this little bit of playing around I did here, I got 21 mpg during my week with it, a little bit better than promised. And as you saw here, this powertrain really delivers a nice growl, a nice punch in the back, and the transmission really delivers those shifts pretty nicely. Therefore, I'm pretty happy with it. It gets 5 out of 5 stars. When it comes to ride and handling out here on the pavement, this has got a relatively quiet ride, even with these 20-inch wheels and tires. Not a great deal of road noise coming up. But the thing about this vehicle is it's built on some pretty good bones, shares the same chassis architecture with the new Cadillac XT5. Now, that vehicle does have an adjustable suspension, light, medium, and dark, or soft, medium, and stiff, however you like to look at it. This one, all one setting all the time, and here, I'd say it's about medium. As you saw back there in a curve, you can throw it into one, and with these tires and wheels on this thing, you get a pretty good amount of grip. Steering feels reasonably good, but still has that deadness that you find with a lot of vehicles with electronic power steering. The one thing I'd point out is that I'm getting a lot of rattling in here, and that really has less to do with the chassis as it is some of the interior trims in these seats. But outside of that, wind noise, road noise, not too bad out here, at least on the pavement. Now, because this has this wonderful little mode knob down here with all sorts of modes for the drive selection, including off-road mode or all-terrain mode, it's just tempting me to take it through the mogul test here, which really causes this thing to have to divvy up traction. So on this little test here, this puts one of the front wheels over there up in the air, or, well, it's going to be in the air, and it puts one of the rear wheels back here in the air or with very little traction. And so as we get up here, okay, now you can see we're kind of teeter-tottering here. That wheel over there is clearly off the ground. Wheel back there is kind of hanging there, very little traction. And so in this mode, this is going to force it to stop those spinning wheels and put traction to the two wheels that have it. So I'm going to lay on the throttle nice and easy here. And yeah, no problem. So it passes a test. Having dialed this little mode selector down here to sport mode, which is all-wheel drive plus a little bit more of an aggressive stance to the steering and the transmission, I'm out here on the Desert Washboard Road. And this is the last stand for any crossover SUV in my testing to see how well bolted together it is, how well sorted the chassis is out here on this ribbed vibrating surface. A lot of washes and ruts and bumps in addition to that washboard surface. It all really tests how tight this thing is and how well the suspension isolates the rough stuff from in here. Well, I gotta tell you, this is a pretty different driving experience from the pavement, and that's because of a number of things. First of all, we've got the rattles in here that you can hear, and we had those on the pavement, and they're twice as loud now that we're on this rough road. But the other thing that's happening here is we've got 20-inch wheels. 20-inch wheels on a vehicle that's really sort of marketed as an off-road all-terrain, which, as I mentioned in the opening, a little bit surprising. And so the reason I say it was surprising is because they tend to give you a shorter sidewall and a rougher ride in the long term, and that's exactly what we're getting here. And it also amplifies what happens when you go over these ruts and bumps, and that transmits into the chassis, and I'm getting a lot of that here, and just a little bit of shudder and rattling in the steering and the suspension. Again, if we had taller sidewalls and smaller wheels, it might not be quite as harsh. That's the word I'm kind of thinking of here. So Boy, this is a really wonderful vehicle on the pavement, but all-terrain might need a little bit of polish, I think. So all in, chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. When it comes to the measure of quality, this is an area I'm usually quite a stickler on, and I have to say, if I'm honest, I was a little bit disappointed in a few key areas, that being body panel fit and alignment. There were a number of areas here, things just didn't line up. It was the kind of stuff that I normally expected from the 80s and 90s American manufacturers. The interior, we had colors and finishes, material quality differences that just didn't match up from one piece to the other. Stuff, again, you get into this price range, you expect to be a little bit better. Door slams, a little bit on the cheap sounding side, and the rattles inside, both on the pavement and off, really just sort of, well, I just didn't think it was up to speed with some of the other GM vehicles I've tested in the last few years. Therefore, quality feel score comes in at 3 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, wrapping it up for the Acadia, I have to say I'm very impressed about the fact that they've downsized this, a brave move in this market, and really put it in the crosshairs of its direct competitors. The old Acadia was nice to have that extra size, but really, when you option the thing up, you were right up there in Yukon territory, and I really think that most people probably thought, you know, I'm just going to get the V8, and the fuel economy just isn't that much different. It really isn't. So here, we've got a vehicle that really is directly competitive now with almost everything else in class. Price-wise on this one, we're at $47,000 and some change. As we talked about, I do think there's some features missing at that price. And a lot of little things in the interior, the auto up-down windows, memory seats, a power shade for that sunroof, which is a little odd, I think. But there's a lot of little things like that that play into the value for me here, which I put at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4 stars for the review. I'm Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. I hope you enjoyed the ride. Well, friends, if you like the test drive you just saw, click on the big red link right here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. I test drive 1 or 2 vehicles a week, plus we have a new video almost every single day. Well, every other day. There's always some cattle guard. There's always something new. So stay tuned.